Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. Elena Sánchez Caballero, Ombudsman for viewers of the state television network RTVE, has received dozens of letters of complaint from evangelicals protesting at the station's report of the Pope's recent trip to Luanda, in which he spoke about evangelical sects. Pedro Tarquis, director of Protestante Digital, called her response a fiasco. The avalanche of complaints meant that Sánchez referred to the issue in her first programme, which was RTVE Replies, broadcast earlier this month. She also sent a standard letter to all those who protested, saying that she'd passed their comments on to the producers of the broadcast, asking them to evaluate the issue and to check on the sources that their correspondents in Africa had used for her report. However, the answer to her request simply said that the report made by the television station's correspondent was based on information produced by international agencies, who in all cases speak of evangelical African sects and recall the serious event last year when in one of them they found 40 kidnapped children. Sánchez added that the context in which the information was written and presented is clearly African and uses testimony from people who live in Africa, and in no way can it be extrapolated to evangelical churches in other continents. Well, this of course hides more than it reveals. She thereby seems to say that in Africa at least, evangelical churches can be considered sects, on the basis that one group that perhaps calls themselves evangelical was involved in kidnapping, and on the basis that a certain number of agencies, presumably with the same line as the Vatican, call such churches sects or cults. However, to apply that across the continent in a broad sweep of the brush is clearly unacceptable. The reporter said she regretted that her words had been interpreted as applicable to evangelicals in general, and she said was certainly not a reference to evangelicals in Spain. Well, that's all very well, but that she's not talking about European evangelicals, but is she thereby damning African evangelicals? Well, clearly she is. Yet in her report what she said was, in recent years evangelical churches have established themselves in Africa offering miracles in return for money, which is clearly an insult to many, many churches. Now, one is tempted to wonder what a report about how evangelical churches have established themselves in Spain might say. Perhaps Spanish evangelicals are safe from similar comments, as another church pretty much has the monopoly on miracles here. Well, Pedro Tarquis, director of Protestante Digital, called the whole thing a fiasco. And he said, firstly, she seems content to label African evangelicals as sects, as if this has nothing to do with their Christian brothers and sisters in the rest of the world. And then, as if African evangelicals do not have the same right to be respected as believers in other continents. Another failing of the report is its lack of accuracy. For instance, it talks about the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God as an evangelical church, when most African evangelicals certainly would not see it as such, in the same way perhaps as the Catholic Church does not consider the Palma de Troya as one of its own. Yet instead of admitting their mistake and correcting it, they try and justify themselves. And Tarquis concludes, if this is how they defend viewers, what can we expect from the defender of viewers, the Ombudsman? Well, as for the report itself which caused the protest, he said it's poorly made, and, as on every papal visit to Africa or Latin America, treats evangelicals from these continents as sects, in a discriminatory, generalized and abusive way, and no explanation justifies something which in both journalistic and ethical terms is unacceptable. And Tarquis goes on to say that the Ombudsman limited herself to a polite letter, but that this does nothing to deal with the lack of respect shown towards evangelicals in the report. And Tarquis finishes by saying that two badly timed evangelical TV programs can do little to offset the damage done by prime-time news comments such as this report, which calls evangelical sects and therefore reinforces, of course, discrimination in the minds of the public at large. It also gives a very biased and unrepresentative view of, let's use a broader term, Protestant groups in Africa, and perpetuates, of course, the Vatican's line that the only true church is the Roman Catholic Church, and by implication all other churches, particularly evangelical ones, are anything but. And Tarquis says a public broadcaster like RTVE should set an example ideally in its informative work, but at the very least rectifying its own mistakes and those of others, instead of putting up this smokescreen by the Ombudsman, which only covers up and perpetuates the abuse of evangelicals. Well, the presentation of a new book about Protestantism cannot come too soon, and next Monday it's due to be presented in Madrid, a book which seeks to uncover and deal with and try and end the discrimination that so often evangelicals and Protestants have suffered at the hands of the Spanish press. We can only hope and pray that the book is used to that end. Thank you for listening to this broadcast on emission.net. Goodbye.
Emisión.net